you. Welcome to our Lagos studio. My name is Daniel Praise Ose Debame. We're going to be looking at Trump's cut on U.S. foreign aid and looking at the global implication and the way forward. Since the President Donald Trump came on board, there have been so many executive order. We're going to be looking at how all that affects the relationship and the significant cut to U.S. That is what we are going to be discussing this beautiful morning. And to have us make sense of the conversation, joining us virtually from Benin City, Edo State, is Honorable Victoria Amu. She's widely traveled. She's been to so many countries, and she is a therapist. Thank you so much for joining us, ma.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now
you
let's
guys
talk
need to be paying me now some subsidy for always appearing on your show.
Oh, definitely, we appreciate your time and always thank you for coming through. Thank you so much. Okay, let's have an understanding of foreign aid. Can you briefly explain the significance of the United States donor aid to developing nations and the sector it primarily supports?
Very significant. The donor aids have come in very handy for all donor-dependent countries. And the significance stems across so many areas that stand to help improve those countries. When you look at the donor aids and the areas in which these aids have been filtered into, you know that lives have been changed as a result of this aid. And because life has been changed, you'll realize that the aids are filtered into areas like poverty alleviation, healthcare, education, agric and food security, humanitarian assistance, infrastructural development, environmental and protection and climate change, peace and security, economic growth and trade. And when you have aids filtered in all of these areas, especially democracy and good governance, you know that most of these donor-dependent countries, including Nigeria, it's very dependent on this aid. And because poverty alleviation, a part of the donor aids where it goes into, is a very important issue in developing countries, because you have a lot of people who virtually make their living, or who are virtually able to feed their family and send their children to school when they are keyed into this poverty alleviation. Then you look at healthcare. When you look at healthcare, you know that if donor agencies are not there, a lot of diseases like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria will ravage the citizens of those countries, including Nigeria. Then when you look at education, you look at the fact that, wow, if there are no donor agencies, that means we're going to have an issue improving literacy and in children and even in the teachers who are teaching them. We're going to have issues with infrastructure. We're going to have issues with teachers training. Then when you look at agric and food security, if we don't have persons becoming farmers, new farmers, persons seeing farming not just as a dirty job, seeing farming as a form of food security, empowering the state in which they come from and empowering their nation, and there is no donation towards farmers, new farmers, or existing farmers, then we're still going to have issues of food security across the board. Then look at infrastructural development.
Okay,
you look at roads. How do you build new roads? You know, if there are no donor, if there's no donation from US or other areas where investments or other countries that do or rich in the philanthropists who put in their money into countries for donation, we're going to have a lot of problems in those areas. So it's times when you look at peace and security, you look at every day there are bandits everywhere. You look at the issues of gangs. You look at the issues of boundary disputes. You know, so
okay.
these donation made by US, always made by US every year or every 5 years, really goes a long way for
Yes, to an
all those
extent.
donor-dependent countries.
We can't take away the impact of the donations from the United States to the dependent country, but policy background, what were the reasons behind former the president's decision to cut foreign aid, and how did his administration justify it? Because he's back to power now, he has done this before and he's doing it again. Countries like Uganda, they won't be getting the HIV and AIDS support again from the United States. Even South Africa, they are going to be on board. He's threatening to cut ties with the South African because of the land border issue. Do you think Africans should solely depend on foreign aid?
No, Africans should not. And these are one of the reasons why President Trump has said he's pulling out of it. Because for President Trump, it's a policy issue for him. For him, he believes it's America first before any other country. He believes that the policies should be all about America first. He believes he needs to, for President Trump, he needs to reduce US spending. And he thinks the first place that he needs to start from is the aid that US have been giving out to all other countries.
Okay.
He believes that he needs to improve his own economy, within. So for him, for him, because it's a policy statement and he's keen into it and he wants to bring it to fruition, he thinks that African countries or donor-dependent countries at a stage where they need to be self-reliant. That's what we don't see. Because even when you have these donations coming into the countries, the utilization of it is mind-boggling. So for him, these countries need to take responsibility. Okay, if we have donated money as US into good governance, democracy, when is that democracy and good governance actually going to play a role in the lives? When are we going to see it from the outside playing a role in the lives of the citizens who elected you in? So for him, it's about those countries becoming self-reliant. It's about eliminating ineffective aid programs. The HIV programs in the country today, some of them are money spinners for coordinators who coordinate them or for the directors of the program. Because when you have such programs, the only way they become effective is when you have such programs with people who are passionate about it. And we have seen that across over time, that persons that they put in those agencies that are donor dependent usually don't understand the mission of those agencies that they are holding. Okay. So he wants to eliminate ineffective aid programs. He wants to make the aids, when US donates aid to a country, he wants to make it conditional. He wants to be sure that you abide with the condition that the country US needs the country that is getting the aid to abide with the condition. That means the programs has to be effective. There has to be timing. There have to be implementation. If the donation is a certain amount, the country before the end of the year has to be able to bring to bear its own counterpart funding, which we don't see, which sometimes the year is over before the country starts to bring its counterpart funding. He also wants to be able to increase pressure on allies, like NATO and all of the other allies, regional allies that still donate, but he wants them to go beyond where their donations go into. He is also targeting aid. Now he's going to target aid for specific countries. This morning, I was reading over the internet that US Trump wants to own Gaza and repair Gaza. you know, Gaza has been ravaged with war with Ukraine for the
Wi-
last 2 years. So
with Israel.
if he's going to put aids into Ukraine, if he's going to put his aids in there, he wants to be able to own it. So
Okay.
that's him targeting the aid and specific country. He also wants to foster national security, you know,
Okay.
and gather UN and multilateral funding. So for him, I think Trump is just being Trump, and
He's just being
he
Trump.
wants
Don't you think he's just
yeah.
being mean to these countries? Is it too hard? Some of these policies or these executive orders, aren't they too harsh? And is it not too early for a president who just returned back as the 47th president of the country?
Well, how many years have these countries been funded under these aids? How many years? I think these US donor aids have been on for maybe 10, 20 years, because one of these US donor aids is the aids that stems into sustainable SDG, sustainable development goals. And sustainable development goals also has poverty alleviation, education, has goals towards poverty alleviation, has goals towards education, has goals towards infrastructure, has goals towards healthcare,
Hmm.
you know, and they have set goals for sustainable development goals up to 2030. I don't know what you mean by mean, but if funds have already been intermittently been given to governments and countries to be able to develop areas, crucial areas that will elevate the economy of those countries, that will improve trade within those countries, and those countries are still self-reliant on the donor. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
In Nigeria, in Edo State, I used to be a board member of an agency called the CSDP. That was like 16 years ago. CSDP is a counterpart agency that the United Nations, the US, is also a donor to those parts of the fundings that enable CSDP to do its activities. What is CSDP supposed to do? CSDP is supposed to go into communities and do a needs assessment and find out what, communities, like coming to my community. I come from Sabongida Ora, I come from Onwa West. You come to Onwa West, they come to Onwa West, they sit down with the leaders of thoughts in Onwa West. They try to find out what are our needs in the Onwa West. What do we need? What do we need there that will help improve our economy, that will help us as a community, will strengthen us as a community? Then they build it. What is it? Do you want a community center? Do you want a market? What do you want? So these communities are able to say, I want this, I want this. Then the US donor has 10 million assigned, 10 raw million naira assigned to that task for the
Monthly,
community.
weekly,
All the
annually?
community, all the community needs to do is bring 1 million counterparts. But what do we see? We see that even for the whole year, the community is still struggling with providing 1 million counterparts.
As against
And if the
as against the
community
10
does
million
not,
donation you get from the United States.
yes, yes, and if you for the 10 million to generate to come into the coffins of the accessibility of the money, there's need for that 1 million to be. And then you have what do you call it? You have representatives in that community who do not see that they need to pay the 1 million. They are waiting for the government in the state to give them the 1 million, for their own people. So what happens? By the end of the year, the community loses out.
And
The money
you
just
have
goes back
people in
to
the community
UN
who
straight.
got the capacity to probably cough out this 1 million naira in the community.
Of course they don't. A community that is already stemming on poverty alleviation, that has there's low income. Everybody in that community are traders, they are farmers. What are you talking? They are carpenters. They are still struggling to feed themselves. Half of the year they are ravaged with natural disasters.
Mm.
It's either flooding, it's either their market stall is burnt.
Okay, now
Is it that
if we
same
have people,
community? Is it that same community that you expect them to bring out from the money that they use in donation,
okay,
that they
Honorable
use in
Amo,
feeding?
let's have an understanding. If the people in the community can't afford that money, they have government
Yeah.
representatives. They have government
Yeah.
representative from the local level. They have the councillors. They have a local government chairman. They have a rep representing them at the State House of Assembly. They have reps representing them at the Federal House of Assembly. They have senators representing them before we even return back to the state government, having a governor overseeing the affairs of the state. So why can't they have this support from this arsenal of leaders at the government level?
That's why President Trump says there needs to be responsibility. There needs to be self-reliance. All of these people you have stated do not think that they have the responsibility of making sure that those needs are met for their people. Otherwise, if it's 1 million we're looking for, if there are 10 representatives in that region, in that area, coming out of Onwa West, I'm using Onwa West as an example.
Okay,
If there
yes.
are 10 representatives coming out of Onwa West and we need just 1 million, those 10 representatives can easily donate 100,000 each. Am I right?
That's true.
Yes,
And you
they
get a
can.
million naira.
Yes, because sometimes they go clubbing and they go eating and they spend over 100,000 eating and entertaining friends. So, but there's no responsibility. So, what can you do? So, those kind of things. That's why President Trump is cutting the aids, because those kind of things are they are everyday reoccurrence. You know,
Okay.
uh, and when these aids come, the year ends, you have not retrieved this. You'll be surprised if you go into implementation and all of these aids and all of these different agencies. Just like we're talking of this, we are also talking of education, different agencies. You'll be shocked that they haven't assessed their aid of last year. You'll be shocked.
Okay. All right, let's move forward now. What impact does it have on the health system? Many global health programs relied on US donor aid. What effect did these cuts have on healthcare services, particularly in Africa, and bringing it down home to Nigeria?
A whole lot, a whole lot. Um, Cutting this donation, we mean that programs like the HIV/AIDS program, the TB program, the malaria program will be affected tremendously. You know, um, we know in Nigeria, we know that HIV is an upcoming disease that is becoming an epidemic. Um, like South Africa. South Africa today doesn't take statistics of persons with HIV any longer. What they do is now they take statistics of persons who don't have HIV. That's what the statistics of the country, that's what they do now in South Africa. So for countries like Nigeria, if this AIDS is cut off, it's going to affect healthcare badly. HIV drugs are donor dependent. Malaria drugs, however expensive, we see it now that there's still donation coming in before it's cut off. It's still very expensive. And every day, every time, we have children with malaria, adults with malaria. Sometimes the symptoms Then TB is also recurrent. So for me, I think at this stage at where we are, as this stage at that we are in, the impact is going to be tremendous. There's going to be disruption of disease control programs. There's going to be reduction in maternal and child health initiatives. Do you know how many mothers, how many pregnant women die in today Nigeria or in today Africa from childbirth? A whole lot.
Okay.
Funding gaps in health initiatives, infrastructures, building. There was a government in Edo State that tapped into the donor agencies' money on building, what do you call it, primary healthcare centers. And the government actually built a lot of primary healthcare centers. After building those primary healthcare centers in all the local
Local
governments of
government.
Edo State, there was not they could not tap into the funding for the infrastructure. Infrastructure means the equipment. Infrastructure means the workforce, because you cannot build a primary healthcare center and not have adequate doctors, adequate nurses, adequate therapists, adequate lab technicians or laboratory, adequate pharmacy. So what we had was that government, particularly in Edo State, built so many primary healthcare centers. If you go there today, they are overtaken by weeds. You know,
So they lacked the professional personnel to handle these centers.
Yes,
okay.
It's overtaken by weeds. So the goal was to move the primary healthcare center from where they were, which were dilapidated buildings, to now modern buildings. But because they couldn't tap into the counterpart funding that is needed to generate the money that would help, that's what we say. When you put people who, first of all, are not passionate about it or who do not understand what the roles are for those things to come, there's going to be increased burden on local government. Then you tell local government, make sure there are doctors. What is local government going to? Is local government going to hire doctors, or they're going to pick sand from the road and be paying doctors?
Okay.
They won't. If the state government doesn't have enough doctors, then there's going to be increased reliance on other donors. There's going to be decreased access, like we said, to HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment. What we are going to see is that your brother sitting near you might just have HIV/AIDS, and he might have been on medication to reduce the viral load to make him able to function within normal society. But when this donation clips off, it just means that your brother will be able to spread that HIV, that's your brother or that's your sister, will be able to spread HIV to everybody. And what troubles me in this whole quagmire is that the young ones who are still young and still active and still everywhere in their life, our next generation are the ones that are going to be severely affected by this.
Okay, Honorable Amo, we are due for a break now. When we return back, we'll be looking at the humanitarian consequences of this aid that has been cut off from the United States to some African countries. But that will be right after this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back from that break. If you're just joining, it's TMI reaching you live from our network studios here in Lagos, Nigeria. We are still looking at the aid cutoff or the executive order from the Donald Trump-led administration to other countries. We still have our guest with us, Honorable Victoria Amu. She's an occupational therapist and one-time gubernatorial candidate in Edo State. Thank you very much for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now let's move on. We're talking about the humanitarian consequences. Now, beyond health care, how did the reduced aid impact humanitarian effort, including food security, education, and emergency relief programs? Though you have highlighted some of it, just give us an understanding of this.
There's going to be increased food insecurity. There's going to be disruption, first of all, in agricultural programs. Remember, Before, we used to think of agriculture, farming as a dirty job and all of that. But the modernization of the modernization that has been brought into farming has enabled us to see that farming is actually can actually not be a dirty profession. So with this disruption in the U.S. aid, we're going to have increased food insecurity. Um, Remember, the donations come in. When they come in for farmers, they come in for equipment. In the farming area, there is farming irrigation, where during the dry season, you are able to plant and your crops are able to grow adequately with the irrigation, making water available so you do not rely on the rain. Those things are equipment. Usually, the donors subsidize government and provide equipment for farming, large equipment for farming. That's why you have people have 10 hectares of land for farming. And all of these tools have been used, all of this equipment have been properly used up in the north. You have farmers in the north. That's why the north has tomatoes, bell pepper, pepper, and all of those things, cabbage, and all of those fruits. The north has it, and the north brings it to the south because the governors in the north key into the farming aspect of the U.S. donor. There's going to be worsening child health care, child malnutrition, and health care. There's going to be reduced access to education. You remember, these donors also make provision for infrastructure. They make provision, like a couple of years ago, we used to have our universities ravaged, dirty, built. They've been built for so many years, and they have never been restructured, refurbished, and most of the schools do not have laboratory components to all of the disciplines. My friend I used to make fun of my friend because when you are in Nigerian school and they say there's a lab, of course there's no lab equipment because it costs money for the university to be able to provide lab equipment, either for you as a pharmacist, for you as a lab technician, or for you as a therapist, or for you as a doctor. Providing lab equipment, if you are going to medical school, means that you need to have cadavers for all your students to be able to do dissection. That costs money. So in education, there's going to be a lot of problem because there's going to be reduced access to education. There's going to be reduced access to educational funding.
Okay.
There's going to be issues with teacher training. There's going to be issues with literacy for the students and for the teachers. And there are going to be issues with limited emergency reliefs in during disaster time. What are the disaster times? The natural disasters, lights, flood, rain, that brings about flooding in a community, the rain taking off the roofs of houses in the community, which Nigerians just started keying into disaster relief. So when you cut off this thing, there's going to be so many homes that are going to be affected. There's going to be, we have talked about food, we have talked about emergency relief, especially natural disasters, especially for the regions. When we talk about education again, you have to look at education for those underserviced regions, like the Amajeres. There was a federal government in Nigeria who said that every Amajere must be in school, and made provision for schooling within their community and during their nomadic adventures. There was also a government in Lagos State who made provision for free education. It was all of those donor agencies that those governors decided to key into. There was also a provision from Lagos State government who made provision for food, procurement of food from farmers.
Okay.
Yes, from farmers. You know, they actually will go to the farm and bring the food to town, and have people in town purchase the food. Makes the middleman, cutting off the middleman and all of those hitches. Then we had governments who said, like in South, who said children should be in school.
Okay.
So we had women affairs commissioners who actually went out on the streets, went out on the streets and started to pick young boys or young girls that they see with food, pure water on their head or food on their head, hawking during school times.
Ensuring they go back to school.
So just yes, go back to school. So all of those programs and all of those activities just keyed into the donor agent, the donor aid that was allocated for those programs.
Okay, Dr. Amu, we need to go now. We have just 30 seconds to leave the studio. Quickly, what is the way forward? Let's have your take in 10 seconds. We need to leave now.
Government needs to be self-reliant.
Okay.
Appointed leaders, appointed leaders to brace up to their responsibilities.
Okay.
If you are in an area, if you are in an agency or you are in an area, go and read up on it.
Thank you so much.
Look at what you can do.
Thank you so much. We've actually exhausted our time.
That you are,
Thank you.
Better the life of your the people you're serving.
All right, we appreciate
that's
you.
what we need to do.
We appreciate you so much, Dr. Mrs. Amu, for finding time to be on the program this morning. We hope to have you again on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, this is our take from our Lagos studio. Let's quickly give you our parting shot before we hand you over to the Benin Network Center. February may be the shortest month, but it carries the weight of love, history, and fresh beginnings. We wish you all the best in the month. Up next is AM News Update. My name is Daniel Praise Debame.